Greetings, it is I, Titus now Van Dracovin, the Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on Vampire the Masquerade. We've been talking about some of the dramatic systems your characters might be getting into, different things that you'll have to be rolling about. We were talking about the social ones, we're going to finish up with them and move on to the mental systems and begin them. So let's continue, as I said, with the social systems that you're going to be using. Now let's talk about the face down. Now the face down is when you're staring at someone, not using any words, just using a battle of the wills, trying to steer someone down. This is often described as being childish, especially between vampires, but it is often done by vampires, that they will basically stare each other down and effectively be like, "Urgh." Now, each side would roll a charisma plus intimidation. Difficulty is your opponent's willpower. They accumulate a number of successes until one side gets a number of successes equal to their opponent's wits plus 5. So whatever my opponent's wits is plus 5 is the number of successes I need to get in order to effectively defeat them and cause them to turn away from you, that you've managed to win this battle. Now, a side could spend a willpower point if they've reached the maximum in order to keep going and attempt to get their opponent to reach the maximum. And you can keep going like that, continually using willpower until you either run out or they reach the point where you're defeating them and they choose not to spend willpower. Effectively, you're overwhelming with your will in order to keep going. It's effective-ish. Now, next I want to talk about performance, because this is really any kind of performance you can put on to entertain or distract the attention of folks. There is a massive combination of attributes and abilities that you could have for using this skill. It's going to be whatever kind of performance you're putting on is going to depend on the combination of the two of them. Your storyteller will let you know. The difficulty is the receptiveness of the crowd to your performance. The more you succeed, the more they remember and love your performance and enjoy it, the better your performance becomes. If you fail, then you just had a mediocre or forgettable performance that people are like, eh. If you botch, you either had a performance that people generally hated, or you do something in the middle of it that screws it up majorly, like you break your instrument if you're using one of those. Now that's all for the social systems. Let's move on and talking about the mental systems. One's based around your mind. Now let's talk about researching, because you're going to research information at various points in time. Maybe you're stuck in where you are in the story and have to find some information out of where to go, things like that. It will be based around the fact that it is an intelligence plus investigation role to discover this information. The more successes you have, the more in-depth about the information you have, the more you find out. It could be that the depths of some kind of topic you're researching may require a lot more successes than you're easily able to get. It could require from up to 10 to 20 to get to the very meat and heart of the matter. Now, the difficulty is based on how obscure and how difficult it is to research this topic. Some kind of topic that's very easy to find out, well, then it's going to be not very hard to get many successes in order to get really high up in it. Something that's very obscure, it might be a challenge to get that many successes. Now, you can continually roll over and over again, but it takes more and more time. The first time you roll, it's an hour long that you're taking to do all this research. The second time, it's taking you an extra day. Third time, a week. Fourth month, fifth year, and so on and so forth, that it could take you decades or even centuries. And since you're a vampire, you can take that amount of time of researching that you're putting this time into discovering something. But the more times you roll, the longer it takes. Now, there could be the possibility that you think you found the wrong information, that when you were researching, that perhaps the information you found is misleading just because of the nature of it and what you knew before you did your research. That can happen. If your character feels that, you are allowed to re-roll the research, but it requires a perception check, requires twice as many successes as you had before, and the difficulty is increased by 1. So it's now perception plus investigation rather than intelligence plus investigation. Now, should you botch, it just means you've caused some kind of error or something you found that is false within the research. Now let's move on and talk about composition. That's making something artistic. That's making some kind of piece of art, a drawing, a sculpture, something like that. It is traditionally an intelligence plus whatever appropriate art ability you have. You set the difficulty you want to make. You determine the difficulty of whatever kind of sculpture or piece of art that you're composing. Then you roll, and the more successes you get, the better the composition actually is. Failure just means you couldn't do it. Botch means you came up with something kind of horrible but people would hate. So there could be wide variety in how you do it. But again, the more successes you get, the more loved and beloved it would be if someone would be experiencing it. There's Recollection. This is recalling information that you might have heard that your character might not be remembering. This could be because you as a player may not remember it, or you as your character wouldn't remember it anyway. Both can come up and have a use for Recollection. It could be like, oh, I as a player don't remember this. My character might recall it. It is an intelligence plus the appropriate ability that would match whatever kind of thing you're recollecting is. Traditionally, it's difficulty 7. The obscure or easy things might change the difficulty upping and downing it. And depending on the number of successes, depends on how well you recall it. If you just get 1, you might just have an inkling of what it is, and the storyteller will give you a suggestion of like, oh, you remember blah about this. You're not remembering everything, but the more successes, the more you remember. A botch, you'd remember something incorrect or false about it. Now let's talk about tracking, which is following some kind of physical trail to discover someone. This is a perception plus survival, though if you're in the city, you could use investigation to do this thing. Traditionally, it starts as a difficulty of 8. Every time you make a check, you make some more headway on the trail. It takes you 5 minutes, and you reduce the difficulty by 1 for your next roll. If you fail, you effectively then don't really lose any progress. Still takes you 5 minutes, but increases the difficulty by 1. Should your difficulty get higher than 10, you lose the trail. So that would be what the consequences of failing a lot of times is. Now the difficulty, as I said, starts at 8, but it can be affected by the weather conditions, the kind of terrain it is, all the other various kinds of conditions that can alter it, how much time it has been since the trail has begun. You could easily start at a difficulty 10 trail to follow, or 9, or it could be a very easy trail, like following someone who just passed by through sand. So that's it for today. I talked about the rest of the social systems, talking about the face down and performances, and I moved into the mental systems, talking about researching, composing things, recalling things, and tracking people. Next time I'm going to finish up with the mental systems in here and move on to combat. That'll be exciting. So if any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, show support for the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to support the channel and the Empire even more, please check out my Patreon link down in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.